now going to move on to the next presenter in our event, who has boots on the ground. With the alarming rate that our Indigenous loved ones go missing or are murdered, oftentimes families are left with little to no answers or ways to find those answers. Thankfully, our Creator gave us our very own vigil auntie, Lissa Yellowbird Chase. Lissa Yellowbird Chase is a Rikra from Mandan Hidatsa Rikra Nation, a mother of 6. Lissa has devoted her life to searching for missing and murdered people across the country and Canada. This devotion has led her to create the Sunny Scouts, an organization that searches for missing people, namely those whose cases that face jurisdictional issues related to tribal versus state and federal jurisdiction. With Lissa's exceptional investigation work, Sunny Scouts have organized over 100 search efforts for missing people in the United States and Canada. Lissa's work with the Sunny Scouts earned her the 2015 Arc of Justice Award from the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition. She and her work are the focus of a book called Yellowbird, Oil, Murder, and A Woman's Search for Justice in Indian Country by Sierra Crane Murdoch. She's been on numerous radio and TV specials. One specific is NBC's Dateline that highlighted her work specific to missing and murdered Indigenous women. With that, please help me welcome Lissa Yellowbird Chase.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lissa Yellowbird Chase. Trying to get away from these 2 dogs is like trying to get away from 2 toddlers. So one of the things I'd like to talk about is when we're initiating change for our missing and murdered relatives. When I first, so I'll introduce these 2 boys. The lighter colored one is Gada, and the darker colored one is Bado. Gada means yellow in Rikra, and Bado means red. These 2 boys are cadaver dogs, and they're service dogs for myself. They're kind of the last in line when we're looking for a relative. And so I've had them for about a year now. And they have been trained in a Rikra so that once we arm other natives, so I'm putting that out there, as soon as we can arm other reservations and natives with dogs, hopefully dual purpose dogs, trailing and cadaver, that their dogs also can be trained in your language. So we're not confused as to who's yelling what commands on a search. At some point in time, what we'd like to do is, like say for the state of Minnesota, if we had a reservation, a res dog, if we had a dog handler on every reservation, that's funny. Little Indian humor there. What we could do is, say we had somebody in Leech Lake, we could have Turtle Mountains, we could have Leech Lake, we could have, there's this group, Gitchagumi, up in Duluth. We could have these different dog handlers all respond to a missing person case. You could have a trailing dog if we were thinking something more clandestine happened. You can have the cadaver dogs and start to resolve some of these cases a little sooner. But so those are the boys. And part of the issue with them is, like I said, having toddlers now. So what I've been doing is I've been taking them, because they are also my service dogs, I've been taking them everywhere I go, because venues like this need to start getting used to people like me. And they need to accommodate our sacred 4-leggeds that are helping the people to find our loved ones. So when when people go to a conference, when they go to a hotel, when they do a presentation, that these accommodations are already set in place. So that's why these guys are here. And like I said, it's like a toddler, but we're working it out. I'm trying to find my own notes here. Let's see. My apologies, I don't know what happened here. So to get started, I don't know if my introductory lady has a copy of that. I can't find it right now. I would like to thank all the people that sponsored this event. I'd like to thank the Unti here for bringing us in a prayerful way, because I can tell you when I come into these cases and we're doing intakes, we're talking to families, and this is a lot of trauma. And not only is the immediate need for trauma that's taking place with this missing loved one, but it also drums up a lot of contributing factors of why people are going missing. Now I can tell you off the top of my head, some of the things, the reasons why people go missing, a lot of times there's drugs and alcohol involved, mostly drugs. That's a very common denominator. Now, when we start talking about chemicals and alcohol being involved in a missing person status, we've already been programmed by the colonizers to feel shame. We don't want to be that dirty Indian. We don't want to be that drunk. We don't want to be that promiscuous woman. So for us to admit that these things, the more common terminology is predation, luring people with alcohol, luring teenagers with alcohol, luring drug addicted with chemicals. That's predatory behavior. And so we need to change our language and our thought process. But the colonial days and the religious interest that plays into how we were programmed, how our grandparents and our parents were programmed, is that we didn't want to be those things. We didn't want to be any of those things. And so when we hear those kinds of words, we feel shame. And shame is the thing that controls us. Now, on the book that was written about my work and my personal life, in summary, it talks about some of the trauma I had growing up. It talks about my addiction. It talks about my inability to keep a relationship, thus resulting in 6 kids from 5 different fathers. It talks about being trafficked as a 15-year-old. It talks about addiction and moving into sex work as an adult. Because at a young age, with the kind of sexual assaults that had taken place on me, I was already programmed as a child to know that my only worth was what my body had to offer. So unprogramming yourself. Here I am today. And the reason why I do the work I do is because I could have been one of those women that I'm looking for. I could have been one of those women in a ditch. I could have been one of those women that these boys found bones of years and years later that nobody looked for because I was a user. And that doesn't make me any less worthy of being found. And so through my work, I try to instill in other women. I try to bring out our masculine part of the men to be our protectors again. When we're out searching, I ask them, I believe this is a women's led movement. And I believe that because we're the life givers. We have that connection to our children. As the aunties, we have connection, the unchis. But I believe it's the men who are to protect us. I've been on searches before where people are taking shots at us because they don't want somebody to be found. And I've approached some of the men, and I found that it's not that they don't want to help, it's that they don't know how. And as women, we need to voice to our men how to help us. We need to be honest, we need to be vulnerable. And you have to have thick skin in this line of work. There's just like family systems, we say we have the scapegoat child, we have the eldest child, the overachiever, the underachiever, the forgotten child. Well, we got all kinds of those when it comes to this movement too. We got the savior, the one that comes into the movement and is like, hey, I know everything, you know. We got opportunists. Hey, I'm gonna run a GoFundMe. I'm gonna make 10 grand and keep 8 of that for my services and maybe throw you down 500. We've got some people out there like that. And that's not only assault on the movement, it's assault to families that need it. So do your research before you give your money away. If you're doing fundraisers, you're beading, you're making dresses, whatever you're doing, you're putting that good energy into your work, your heart, your spirit goes into that work. And then to have somebody take an opportunity to exploit that. I've seen that. You have the lead searcher who's going to be in charge of everything. You got the control people. So there's a lot of different dynamics that take place. So you need to walk into this with open eyes. One of the interesting things that, you know, there's a lot of people who spoke this morning, and I just want to kind of touch on some of the things that I felt were left out, is our men and boys. And that's why I like the term relatives. I can tell you from being boots on the ground that our men and our boys are missing more than our women. And when we acknowledge only the women and we don't acknowledge our men, are we giving them a space to feel comfortable, to acknowledge the issues that are contributing on why people are going missing, why people are being murdered? When you have a missing person, the first thing you should do is make a report to law enforcement. And that's no guarantee that anything's going to be done. Because a lot of times they don't even write a report. It's like they let you download on the phone or whatever, and they're like, yeah. So the first thing you need to do after making that report is to demand a report number. Before you even pick up that phone, you better run to the dollar store and get you a little composition book. What time did you call? Who did you talk to? What information was given? Where's that report number? Because if you don't have that report number, or they're hesitating at giving you a report number, then that means there's no report being made. Their report sometimes is, we'll mention it at the next staff get together for the next shift. And unless you make some noise, it falls to the wayside. It might not be mentioned on the morning shift because they're all going to assume night shift took care of it. You cannot trust anybody else with your loved one's care and concern for their missing status. You have to be the person. I will tell you right now that you need to get a group together. Who in your family is going to all be responsible for this? Because you're literally going to work in shifts as well. That notebook needs to be written in every single interaction. Somebody's going to call. Your next step would be hit social media. We all know how good gossip goes on social media. Be inclusive. Full body pic, face pic, scars, marks, tattoos, any deformities, any body jewelry. Going on Snapchat and getting a filtered face. I've had people standing right in front of me and didn't even recognize it was them. Till I saw a tattoo when they turned and I'm like, hey, that's so-and-so. And then you confront them and say, hey, you know how many times people didn't even know they were missing? Because they were out doing their thing. Which brings us to family relationships, friendships. What obligation do we have to people that we care about? Where's our responsibility in being accountable? I will tell you right now, I've got almost every kid that I've had on GPS. And it's not me on them. They're keeping track of me. It's pretty terrible when you they're like, Mom, you're out there searching. We want to know where you're at all times. My mom, I didn't know about this, but until this last year, I didn't realize how much my mother worried about me. After my grandma died, I could tell that she needed a little bit more of my presence. And she would worry when I would leave. And now my daughter says after Christmas, she said, when you were down in Illinois, I think it was, she said, this is how grandma's on her recliner. And she looks over to see where you're at every once in a while. And she says, oh, that girl looks like she's speeding again. But that's being accountable. That gives my mom a little, you know, once in a while I might pull over on the way home. You got the outlet center, you kind of, you know, if it doesn't show that you're spending money you don't have, well, then she wants to know, hey, what's going on while you're sitting there? And it's kind of nice. You know, I guess, I ain't gonna lie, I take her up to the casino every once in a while and she's like, what are you doing? And that's about being accountable though. We have relatives that are out doing their thing too. And it's hard not to be judgmental, but we have to have a level of trust so that we can keep track of each other in a respectful way. Yeah, they're gonna drink, some of them, but we have to be unconditional. There's most of the phones program now, they will show you, even if the phone's turned off or goes out of service, where the last point of contact was with that phone. That's important. So if you have one person that could be unconditional, at least know who that person is in your circle so that you can check on your loved ones. The other thing I'd like to talk about, or readdress actually, is the men and boys. Because of what happened in the boarding school systems, we have a lot of men who were sexually abused too, sexually assaulted. And because of that, we have a lot of predators in our own communities that are also violating our males and our youth, our young men, our boys. We have to give a safe space, which means that we're gonna have to step up as a human and call out some of our own relatives. And I don't know if we're comfortable, if we're even at that chapter yet. But we need to give our boys and our young men that space too. how we can be a community that says that it's okay for a young lady or a girl to be sexually assaulted and not a boy. That means we're not giving them a platform. We're not giving them that trust to come to us. So we need to acknowledge that. Talking about tribal politics. What does that do to our communities when it comes to missing and murdered? If you're related to so-and-so and they throw their old lady out of the car 50 miles an hour and she loses half her skull but lives, is that acceptable? Or is that something we just don't talk about because that's one of our representatives' brother? That makes it okay? Nobody wants to step up? Why? Because you're worried about your job? Because you're worried about housing? Because when you're living on the res, everything's dependent on that leadership or lack thereof? I'm not a favorite in my community. But you can guess why. We're not really ready for that conversation yet either. And that's okay, because I am so dedicated to this work right now. I would live out of my car with my 2 dogs and hold somebody accountable than to know that I have a secure roof over my head and a job that I don't really have to participate in, which brings us to another whole level of service providers. Do we have qualified service providers in our communities who are actually doing the work, or do we have somebody's relative in there that's fulfilling a title and getting a big paycheck and isn't even qualified to be there? Social services is a problem. We had this young lady on the video talking about notifying tribes. These are all contributors to why we have people that are missing and murdered. These are forgotten ones. When you have unqualified people working in social services, then you can get all the calls you want to that organization. But if they agree not to intervene, then what happens to that child? I'd say you could get 100 calls. And if the tribe does choose to intervene on some level, it's usually because it's a relative of a upper level government, tribal government persons. What about all the rest of the children? That leaves them out into major foster care, streamlined into white foster care systems, and they're washed of their ethnicity. A lot of them are abused, and that puts them right into the same level of imminency and danger as if they were on the streets. There's just a longer road to get there. What about our BIPOC relatives? What are requirements to recognize that our indigenousness? I have Black grandchildren. I worry about their safety. I worry about their safety double now because they're Indigenous and they're Black. Never thought I'd have that issue, but I'm worried. I have a grandson that's autistic and he acts like his grandma a lot of time. And I think because he's Indigenous and he's Black and he's autistic, what's gonna happen to him? What happens if you have a meltdown? His chances of getting shot by, especially Minneapolis PD, are probably in the high 90 percentile. So the next issue is recognizing allies, being humbled enough to know that we can't do it all on our own. We don't have all the answers, right? For a lot of people, this is a learning process. That's why I'm up here and stomping in the fields and all kinds of stuff to try and locate every relative we got. A lot of times I come up empty-handed, but I keep coming back because at this point, for a lot of families, we're just the only hope they have. Do we revisit, and I keep coming back with bigger tools like these two boys, these two sacred four-leggeds here. So going back to having thick skin, nobody knows what to do, but everybody has an opinion. You have to come here vulnerable. You have to show that side of you because this battle is spiritual. It has been for 500 years. When I was asked to come here in Western North Dakota, we didn't run out, we had a storm that took out our electricity. 5 days. No electric, no heat. Like, it was like Standing Rock all over again, but I had about 1,000 excuses why I couldn't make it to this venue. And I thought, that's the same reason everybody has for not coming to a search. Everybody gives up. Everybody doesn't know what to do. So regardless of the fact that you got dog hair on you from the car and your boys are acting up and all these things, you need to show up anyway. Because showing up is 90%. And I can tell you that the ancestors are happy. They're happy that we're all here together sharing this moment, exchanging information, making ourselves vulnerable, creating some thought processes, saying things we always think about, but never say it out loud, because I'm that guy. But in order to combat the issue of missing and murdered relatives, we need to start talking about hard topics. We need to find that level of comfortability and security within safe spaces. And I feel this is one. So I have some of the work, like they had said, have been featured on Dateline. That was more for the boys. They were featured on there too. My story of losing my niece to murder and doing the work to find her. That story is on Dateline, and there is also a podcast on This American Life. And they took my words that I was so exhausted when I was talking to one of the people involved in her murder that I said, you know, I was gonna say, I'm a force to be reckoned with. But I had been on the phone pleading with this guy for like 2-3 days that I said, I'm a mess to be reckoned with. And that's the title of the story on This American. So if you guys look for it, that's what happened. The book Yellowbird was done by a good friend of mine now, relative actually, Sierra Crane Murdoch. And it involved actually the murder where the tables were turned of a white oil field worker who went missing on my reservation. So it's kind of like the topsy-turvy of what we are always talking about. It was that young man, Christopher Clark, that got me into this work. We had done a rescue a year earlier, but it was him ultimately that put me on this path. So I thank Christopher every day for making me able to help the people. I thank the ancestors for guiding me and protecting me a lot along this way. It hasn't been easy. The spiritual battles, you know, being shot at by people that don't want you to find somebody. On one search, I contracted tuberculosis and Rocky Mountain spotted fever and almost died. Walking through sloughs, I got fungus on my leg and thought my leg was gonna fall off. There's been a lot of like little injuries and things, so it's not like this is a really glamorous deal. Now a lot of people say, oh, well, you're getting some coverage. They made a book, they made this. Well, I'll tell you what, it's been 10 years. And you figure, it's easy math, people, 10 years times 365 days a year. This is my life. How many days is that? And you got 4 features out of that. So for the ones that think you're gonna come rolling in and be like, hey, I wanna be on TV, good luck. Do the math. And people see those features, but what they don't see is sitting on a boat following a young man's body down the Missouri for 4 months, trying to catch him, trying to hook him, trying to whatever, with the mother's permission, because she just wants him back. They don't see that getting up every day at the crack of dawn and coming back at the end and doing day in and day out and all the sacrifices. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Our people are worth it. And when you project that, you can project that onto yourself because you're worth it too. That's how we change the mindset of what's going on. That's not our shame. I appreciate everybody's attention. I appreciate for sharing the space with you. I don't know, did you have a question time? Okay, from what I understand, they wanted to give some time to for questions.
We will now take questions from the audience. We also have, we will also take questions from the Zoom audience if you'd like to put it in the Q&A function. For those of you that may need a break, remember that there is a self-care room on the 2nd floor. We're also doing some smudging outside the doors if you feel a need to take care of yourself. Jayme and I will go around with questions, and Julie may have some from the Zoom audience.
Hello, thank you so much for sharing. It's been really enlightening. I'm an international student, and many of the things that you have shared, I did not know about. So first of all, I wanted to thank you. In part of your presentation, you said that it's important for us to know where our money is going. I really believe in your cause, and I was looking up how to donate to you, and there was nothing. Even though you have many features, there's nowhere in the features that says how to provide support. And I just wanted to ask you if people here in the audience, including myself, wanted to donate to you, where could we do, or similar causes? Where?
Well, I just got a fiscal sponsor, so I can post that on the Spanish Scouts page. I don't really handle too much of that because I'm not going to lie, that's why I needed a fiscal sponsor, is because they're just ADHD. I don't know how to handle money, and I'd rather that be somebody else's problem. But now that I got one, I'm good to go. I just acquired one.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful speech, and you have such a brave and strong heart to fight for other minority women. But my question is, how do you personally walk out the shadow or the abuse experience? And do you therapy or find someone to talk? So,
for myself?
Yes, or for others.
I would say for myself, how my recovery was established, and I'm not gonna lie, my addiction took me to prison. And I think prison saved my life. I found my spirituality there. I was able to let go of the colonial religious systems that were instilled in me. And when I got out, I became a dedicated person of walking the red road. So I really do my healing through my spirituality and the network. This work actually for me is healing for me in itself.
Any other questions? Okay. We'll take one more question before we go to break.
I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate a little bit more about how you got your two friends here to help you, and kind of maybe some tips about how other reservations can do the same.
Okay, so after the whole Dateline thing, I actually came into contact, and I hope they don't see this, but I've said it to their face. What are the chances that two hippie white ex-cops would reach out and offer? They train dogs for all kinds of things, from COVID to bed bugs to wine barrels to cadaver to trailing. They saw the Dateline event and they asked how they could help. So they offered the dogs at a discount. And my intentions were to get one dog. Because of a spiritual event that had happened, I ended up with both of them. So what we're doing is we've been networking with some of the supporters of my work. I'm not gonna kid around. I throw it out to the universe. I put it on Facebook. Our next recipient is out of Leech Lake. His name is Daniel Wind. While we were on the Nevaeh Kingbird search, he was allowed to run Badot, which is the red dog. And they developed such a strong relationship in 2 weeks. And he listened to like everything I offered him, that I said, you should consider getting a dog yourself. Well, it just so happened we ended up in, so we purchased, one of our first purchases was for an individual out of Pine Ridge who works with OST management, the emergency management down there. And because they have a lot of missing people, we help them acquire through our network and our supporters to purchase a dog for Pine Ridge area. Because for the most part, police will not be willing to utilize funding or resources to find our people. That makes it available that the dog is on Pine Ridge, which has a lot of activity with missing and murdered there. So that resource is there. There doesn't have to be any payment. There doesn't have to be any red tape. John is handled, went through the training and has his own dog in the Pine Ridge area. Next one is Leech Lake. After that is Eagle Butte and Petu Chasing Honk. What I do is I throw it out on social media and I ask for a funder. And because of the whole, I just don't like to mess around, I asked them to make the check right out to my vendor. And so far it's worked out. They get their tax, paperwork or whatever taken care of. And then I don't really have to be involved in that. So if you are interested and you feel like you could make a commitment, now this is like children almost. There's a relationship there. And it takes, fortunately for me, I was going right into empty nest syndrome. My two went to the army and they're over, with the whole Ukraine thing right now. But rather than go into empty nest syndrome, I acquired 2 dogs. So I'm just like kind of back where I started. But it's a commitment and it's a relationship. And it's a spiritual connection as well with them. So if you're interested, let me know.
So let's have a huge round of applause for Lissa, Yellowbird Shape. We are so happy that you showed up. Thank you.